Welcome to Awaken Sovereignty, a solo cast on ascension, shadow work, empowerment, and alignment with your highest purpose. I'm Chris Pinckley, spiritual coach and guide for those moving through deep awakening, transformation, and personal evolution. Let's begin. In this episode, I'm going to discuss the art of listening and negotiation. Now, it is my opinion and experience that the absolute best negotiators are actually the best listeners. And here's why. When you develop, and really what we're looking for here is the word is cultivate. When you cultivate over time the ability to really hear somebody, the ability to stay silent, the ability to allow somebody else to really share what's going on, you learn so much more than another person who's just waiting for their turn to either express what's going on in their life, A, or B, worse, project some sort of trite solution onto whatever this person is trying to express. The person might not even be looking for a solution. They may be just simply trying to get it out, to express it to another human being. And it's also, there's a caveat here. A lot of natural good listeners are actually people who need to do the opposite, which is to develop boundaries. Because somebody who's sort of is born or incarnates with the ability to listen, usually their life path revolves around forming boundaries so that they don't get emotionally dumped on. They don't enable codependencies. They don't have people constantly come to them and just dump all their garbage emotionally onto them. This is something different. What I'm talking about here is, for most people, they need to really develop and cultivate the ability to hold space for long enough for a person to really be able to express themselves without either getting completely abandoned when the so-called listener starts to just, parrot out their own litany of whatever is going on in their life, or worse, projected with some sort of trite solution. What we're talking about here is something much deeper and more profound, and that's the ability to really be silent. It doesn't mean you're a catatonic zombie. So many people will jump to extremes with this. And that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the ability to hold space. You give verbal cues, not too many, just enough so the person knows you're listening, and allow this person to really get it out. And what you'll find when you do this, when you really truly do this, is this person will say things to you and express things to you that they haven't said or expressed to anybody else, maybe even ever in their entire lives. And that's the real true art of listening. And a shrewd negotiator, somebody who's in business or an executive, working the corporate ladder, or whatever it may be, can really utilize this to their absolute advantage by way of allowing, whoever it is that they're in negotiations with, whether it's a buyout, whether it's a contract with a vendor, whatever it is, they will have the upper hand in this scenario simply because they're able to remain silent and allow this person to get out everything that they need to get out. The other thing that happens when you do this is you're able to see through what this person is saying. The more adept you become at listening, the more you start to almost become like an energetic ability. You begin to be able to sense what's really behind their words, to feel what they're really feeling, if you're able to be silent for long enough. And you can start to see the message behind the message. And when you do this, you're closing in on mastery. You will always come out ahead in any negotiation, in any business dealing, anytime, anywhere, once you cultivate this ability. Minus somebody else who's able to do this as well, then you're just going to be on equal footing. A couple of decades ago, back when I was running a wildly successful personal training business in the San Francisco Bay Area, I would be able to tell, because I always had people coming up to me in the gym, asking about training, and I would just go silent and I would listen to them. And a lot of people would tell me, there were times where I was struggling too, I would say before I became wildly successful, I learned this. And there would be people that would come to me and express interest in training and say, and say that they're interested. And there would be people who would express interest in training and they would keep telling me, yeah, I'm going to sign up, next week, next month or whatever. Now, this is sort of a trite, obvious example, but it's also a true example that I could begin to detect pattern recognition as well as start to sense who is really, truly interested and who is not. And the value here is that you don't waste your time and energy and emotional energy especially if you're really trying to get started, in being hopeful about people who have actually no intention of working with you. This is invaluable, especially if you are a struggling business owner, you're trying to get it off the ground, to be able to tell the difference between somebody who is really, truly interested and somebody who has zero interest and is just, maybe they might even be an energy vampire, just trying to pull your energy out and feed off your energy. I don't want to get, too metaphysical or woo-woo here, but these things are real. It happens. And I'm adept and attuned to it myself. I've got rock solid boundaries because of years and years of trial and error and all the things that I've gone through. I've developed these rock solid boundaries around my time and energy. And somebody who is really, truly, I can tell that they're not interested. Now it's my coaching practice. I don't waste a lot of time and energy on them. I'm here to help anybody who wants the help. And some people, over the years, there are people who can't afford it, who need the help. And that's a different story. And then I'm able to sense if they're really serious about changing their life. And if they're really seriously in a really bad spot, then I've helped many people in that way. But really referring to people who approach you and say they're interested in your service, and this is just one example. There are many different corporate examples where you're dealing with a vendor, and you're trying to interview vendors to fill a slot in your company, or maybe there's a merger or a takeover, or you're trying to sell your business, and seeing the intention of someone who says they want to buy your business, who really just wants to try to get it for as little as possible, and then basically just gut it for a profit and turn it into some sort of mass marketing, corporate, corporately owned and run type of business, right? Back to the personal training days. I mean, I ran personal training for decades, so it's easier for me to extrapolate examples from this. And I was also in the top 3 most successful trainers in the Bay Area for at least 3 years running during that time. And I could tell when somebody would come up to me, and oftentimes it got to the point where, because of my boundaries and because I sifted and sorted, it's almost like the universe responded and it bent to my will, or it reformulated. And so the only people who came to me eventually were people who had check in hand or were ready to go in that moment. Literally. This literally happened that way. And it's because I began to create boundaries, sense people who weren't serious. And sometimes, strangely and ironically, that went for people who were already signed up. And it was deleterious to me to try to get these people to renew every single month. It was a task. And to try to get them to come in the gym and get them to do the workout and get them to do the diet, ugh. And it just drained you. And I began to fire those people as well, because I sensed that they didn't really want to learn how to utilize their own energy. They always wanted to ride my energy. Now, as a personal trainer, your job is to be an energetic motivator, but not to your detriment, not to the completely depleting yourself, And so this is it's a kind of a tangential example, compared to what I'm really referring to, more along the lines of in the corporate world or in the business world, where you're negotiating either a buyout or a merger or some sort of a contract with a client, and you want to see what the real intentions are, if the more time that you spend in silence and the more time they spend in talking, the better off you're going to be. And that's an absolute fact, because with your silence and your holding space and being present, intently listening, and giving the occasional verbal cues that you're listening, they will reveal all to you. Eventually you will know, you'll first know because they'll tell you, but as you get better and better at this, you'll begin to sense their underlying intention, and whether they're serious about the deal. You'll know if they really want it, but they're trying to lowball you, right? These things will become more and more apparent to you. I mean, it also helps if you become a regular daily meditation practitioner. This heightens all of your senses, including your intuition. And obviously you want to do at least 20 minutes a day, but even just 20 minutes a day will heighten your ability to sense things, your intuitive abilities, and also it will make you a better listener. And why is that? Because you become less unconsciously reactive and projective the more that you meditate. It's a natural byproduct of continued, consistent meditation. And I believe that the point that I'm going to leave you with is that the person at the table who says the least is going to wind up being the person who commands the most power in whatever happens next. And so I think that'll do it for this episode. I think we'll wrap it up there. Stay tuned for a lot more coming up. And hey, in the meantime, take good care, and we'll talk to you soon. If this episode resonated with what you're moving through, and you're interested in private spiritual coaching around awakening, emotional integration, shadow work, relationships, boundaries, or building a soul-led life and business, email me directly at rc101coaching@gmail.com with the word coaching in the subject line. You can also find the contact link in the show notes. Follow Awaken Sovereignty for future episodes and share this with someone moving through their own awakening. This is Chris Pinckley. Stay awake, stay aligned, stay sovereign.